Good evening, hockey fans, and welcome to our virtual town hall, a live edition of our Just Wingin' It web series, debuting a new time slot of 6 o'clock Monday nights. I'm John Peterson, and joined today by two of our leaders here at the Kalamazoo Wings organization. You should know them well by now. We have our Governor and Director of Business Operations, Toni Will, as well as our Head Coach and Director of Hockey Operations, Nick Bootland. This is a live show where we are taking your questions about the most recent announcement, of course, the one from 1 week ago, where the K-Wings opted out of the 2020-21 season due to the COVID-19 pandemic, along with several other teams, about half the league at this point, opting out of the season. Obviously, it is not what we wanted. I think one thing that should become clear by the end of this hour-long virtual town hall is that all of us wanted to play. I think we tried everything we possibly could to have a hockey season, and we are just as disappointed as you are as fans. So we're all in this together. We can't wait to get back. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome our two guests and start answering your questions. If you submit them on our live feed, we will get to those as we go along. But we'll start with you, Toni. You've been in on a lot of these meetings, all of them, with the league's Board of Governors. And this goes all the way back to March, when last season ended prematurely and the season got suspended. This was an ongoing discussion, how we approach COVID-19 as a league, as each individual market, and how we return to play. Obviously, things changed seemingly monthly, if not weekly. Can you kind of fill us in on how we got to this point from March to obviously last Monday's announcement?
Sure. Yeah, I'll try and condense it the best I can because it was a 9-month journey. So I'll take everyone back to March. Those meetings were quite different. We were making very swift decisions with little knowledge. So if you think about what we know now about COVID-19 and what we knew then, I mean, it was so little back then. It was a lot of guessing. And all we knew is that we had 3 weeks left in the regular season, of course, playoffs to come. And we had a bunch of players all over the country and in Canada. And there was a pandemic. And it was scary. So we were making very quick decisions to get these players home. And home could be in the US, but it could also be in Canada or overseas. And so we were making decisions very, very quickly. Then it moved into this kind of this, I guess, for lack of a better term, this kind of gray limbo area, because the season was ended, but we were waiting to see what the NHL did with the rest of their season and the AHL, because they didn't announce for a long time like what their plans were. Finally, the AHL said that they were done, and then the NHL announced that they were going to do what we know now, it's bubble hockey, and they did it successfully. And that's when that mentality of the bubble hockey, the bubble basketball at the NBA, like it worked, right? Because these players were willing to move to a different city and live in this bubble. We knew very early on in the minor leagues that wasn't an option for us, simply from budgets, and we were not televised. We're minor league sports. I mean, our bread and butter is sponsorships, revenue, or walk-up revenue, ticket sales, food and beverage sales. It's not TV deals. So, which is part of the charm of minor league sports. We're a developmental league. So it moved into not only Board of Governors meetings, where we vetted these things out, but a lot of this was happening on the COVID committee. So that was another committee that I served on. And we kicked around so many different ideas. We engaged surveys with each governor or team president to figure out, because the ECHL covers 19 states and 2 Canadian provinces. So what was happening in Michigan was not what was happening in Florida, was not what was happening in Newfoundland. We were all dealing with different jurisdictional restraints. It was like this Rubik's Cube that you just couldn't find an easy solution to. And ultimately, we landed on the split season concept, the 13 teams that opened up last weekend, which is fantastic. We're so happy for them in the South and in the West, where restrictions are not as difficult as they are in the North and in the Midwest. And so ultimately, Kalamazoo, because of our jurisdictional restraints and the safety of not only the players, but our hockey ops staff, our front office staff, our fans, our employees at Wings Event Center, it was the socially responsible decision. And it was difficult. And I will personally say, and I'm sure Nick would agree, it was very emotional. Man, we've been riding this coaster for 9 months, and I wouldn't say there's very many highs on it. It was more like just a constant descent. So, but like you said, John, we were in it together. We'd talk to each other, whether it was in a group setting or I'd call Nick or Nick would call me, and we understood. It's nice because we're a close-knit team, and we understood and could help kind of talk each other through it, because we truly didn't know where we were going to end up. This literally came down in the last couple of weeks. November didn't help us in Michigan. And it was just the simple fact that COVID cases were on the rise. And, it was the responsible right thing to do. And our fans, I shout out early on, our season ticket holders, our general public fans, so understanding, so supportive. And I thank you. My staff thanks you. I know Nick's staff does too, for being so understanding, because we felt that.
Yeah, I was relieved at the response that we did receive. A lot of people understood kind of the situation we are in and how unique that situation is. And Nick, I wanted to get to right away. I mean, you guys put in a lot of work this offseason. I don't think people realize the amount of work that the coaching staff puts in, the front office as well. I mean, we put in a lot of work to get ready for the year, but you guys, aside from recruiting a team, signing at least 24 players, going over video, hours and hours of video, you and Joel and Kyle Forte. When the news finally came down, when did it hit you, and how tough was that news to take?
Well, yeah, first off, obviously my staff is devastated is probably the word that we would use. This is the toughest thing that I've ever had to deal with in my professional career. And, we haven't even got to the part where you're thinking about yourself yet, to be honest. You're thinking about players, and, we obviously knew prior to the announcement, what was the announcement on a Monday, and we knew our players were becoming free agents on the Sunday, and we were adamant, and the league agreed that we wanted to be the ones to obviously tell our players. We had, with tryouts and those type of agreements plus signed guys, we had 31 guys committed to coming to Kalamazoo to try and be part of our culture and try to win a championship. And we felt like this is one of the teams we've been excited about, and we were truly excited about the team that we put together. And having a staff that all lives in Kalamazoo for the first time ever, I think is something that is a testament to that. You have Kyle, who lives here. You have Joel and his family who lives here. You have Mitch McLeod, our equipment manager, lives here. Obviously, Scott Allison has lived here for a long time. But literally, those are the people that I take care of, and those are the ones that I'm responsible for. So, those are the people that you worry about first, and those are the people you lose sleep over, is them, and then the players, right? We all understand how short careers are. We understand how short careers can be if you miss 18 months. We understand that there is people who are playing hockey and they're super fortunate. And, that was a tough weekend, even this weekend, watching ECHL scores, and that's your league and that's been your life. And to be sitting back trying to help players find jobs, that's what we've been trying to do as a staff right now. And, there's no exaggeration to the 40 phone calls a day since the news has come out. And it's not an exaggeration. That's what we've been trying to do. We've talked to every player individually. When we first told them it was a Zoom setting, because I wanted them all to know at the same time. So we told them that as a staff, and then I reached out to every single one of them. As much as we select them, they have to select and want to be part of our process as well. So we thanked them for that, and it was a crazy turnaround, right? I mean, we were full steam ahead even when Governor Whitmore slowed things down there in mid to late November, where she sort of stepped back and closed us down. Our marching orders were to move forward, and that's what we were trying to do as an organization. And then, less than 2 weeks later, we were having to make a really tough decision with not a lot of information, or not enough information to feel safe with the decision that was going to be made. So ultimately, it's crazy, for sure. For lack of a better term, crazy is the word that I've been using. But we're going to find a way to bounce back from this. That's for sure.
I've got one more for each of you to kind of set the table here. And then we have a lot of questions rolling in right now from the fans that I definitely want to give enough time for, so we can try to get through as many of them as possible here this hour. Real quick, Nick, you mentioned the meetings you had with the players. As soon as this news we all knew that we were going to be opting out. I believe you wanted to meet with them before the the press release went out, before the news went out to the public. How tough of a conversation was that, and how did the guys take it generally as a whole?
Usually there's questions, usually there's comments, usually you get on with a group of hockey players and there's personalities, and those things usually come out, right? Usually there's a little bit of fun, usually there's a poking fun at people, and there was none of that. There wasn't one single question. I said what I had to say. I know Joel came on and went next and said what he had to say, and then Kyle came on after that, and basically reiterating how much we care for them and let us know if we can help them in any way. And our jobs as a staff is to try and help hockey players get better and help them in their careers. And I've used the term before, whether it's helping an older player stay relevant and stay in the league, whether it's a first-year guy teaching them how to become a pro, or it's one of those fortunate guys who continue to move up the ladder and trying to be a small part in what they're trying to do to prove that they don't belong in our league. And that's what we love about our job. And to be doing the opposite and sort of giving them the information. I wouldn't have wanted someone else to tell them by any means, but it was very quick. It was a much quicker conversation than I even expected, because there really wasn't much else to say after we talked about it. And at that point, it was just like, hey, listen, in the next 5 days, I'm going to follow up with every single one of you individually. And we've done that since. And I know that Joel and Kyle have called players that they had a big hand in bringing in, or players that they've known from the past, or players they felt like they could call. I would say they probably didn't call everyone. I know that I called every single player on our list, and I let them be selective on who they were going to call.
Tony, the NHL and the AHL seems like we're a little bit behind the ECHL's return to play plan. It does seem like those leagues, obviously being bigger businesses, or maybe more unified as far as an all or nothing approach, whether they're all going to play or they're not going to play. Or the ECHL ended up having this option of a split schedule, and some starting obviously last weekend, some delaying and ending up opting out. I've heard you say the term spinning the hamster wheel, and at some point you just have to make that decision. How difficult were some of those constant meetings where you can't get 26 different people to agree on a plan?
Well, they're all confidential, so I'll tell you what I can say. It felt like a pressure cooker. It did, because everyone, like my head, my heart's in Kalamazoo, right? But I'm one of 26 other member franchises, so I had to stop and think what it would be to be Rapid City. And Rapid City, I mean, they've been at 100% occupancy this whole time. And so I don't want to, in this example, I don't want to be the one team saying, no, you can't play Rapid City. Not that I hold that much power, but the goal was to get as many teams to be able to play as possible. And so, and one of the beautiful things about minor league hockey is that we are so creative. We have to be, right, to get fans through our doors. We're doing like, I know we beat this horse dead, but we set a Guinness Book of World Records a year ago. I mean, how creative is that? You don't see, other teams at the major level doing that, right? So we're creative as a board, and it trickles all the way down to our organizations. So, but there were meetings, and the COVID committee, because the COVID committee, we would frame it and then we'd bring it to the Board of Governors. And it was changing so quickly that if you weren't listening and participating in the COVID calls, and those lasted anywhere from an hour to 3 to 4 hours, depending on where we were throughout the process. And then that was to condense it down to bring it to the board meeting. And the board meetings would last anywhere from 2 hours to 6 hours, all over Zoom. So, and that was a whole new method for all of us. I mean, all of us governors are type A's. We're used to, executing and making decisions. And now we were kind of rendered helpless. And as Nick said, we were so worried about everyone else in our organizations, and I haven't really even stopped to think about me at this point, because I'm worried about our fan base and my staff and the board that I serve with. So it was tough.
I want to get some of the fan questions, and one of the first ones, and we'll kind of go down chronologically here as the questions roll in. But Ben wanted to know, him specifically, he purchased a 20-game half-season package, and I know there are a lot of season ticket holders that we want to make sure that we communicate this with. But are their tickets going to transfer over to the 21-22 season, which we anticipate starting on time in October?
Yeah, they're going to roll right over. So, and so the price you paid back when you bought them, you may have bought them in 1920, hoping to use them. But if you bought them, because we did have those games that we had to cancel as well. So yeah, they're going to roll right over to 21-22.
A couple questions have rolled in, Nick, from a player's standpoint. I see several of them that are all similar. The way this is kind of working out is unprecedented, where teams that are playing can now go sign players that are free agents from teams that are opting out. So that means all of our guys that you guys had signed can go elsewhere. And I think, us being an organization that wants to see players succeed, you already said it. You want to see players move up to the highest level that they can play. You hope that they sign contracts to play elsewhere. Do we know yet what that looks like? First of all, on the players' rights, if we have any sort of say in those players coming back to us in the future. And on another note, have you heard of anything so far shuffling around, any of our guys signing elsewhere?
Yeah, I think first off, I think there's going to be somewhere in 4 to 5 that are going to end up at the ECHL level. I know there's more than that looking. Obviously, the dynamic of what's gone on in this league, you look at ECHL teams and them getting affiliated players, right? I think the example everybody's using right now is sort of Florida got 8 players from Nashville. I think Toronto sent close to 8 players to Wichita, if I'm not mistaken. And there's players that are getting plopped in from all over the place in different levels. So it's going to be a lot more difficult than a normal season if this was to happen and there was a lot of jobs left, right? So basically half the league is playing. So it went from a 26-team league to 13 at this point, right? I mean, there's obviously options for 2 more teams to possibly pop in there, and that would be great for those franchises if they did. But, I think we're up to about 4 or 5 guys at this level. And then we've even presented to some of our players, especially our young guys, about opportunities even to play in the Southern Pro League. And, that league went from 11 to 5 teams. And we have good relationships with those coaches. And I know at least one of our players so far is taken sort of that bet on himself approach, kind of like a major league player signing a 1-year deal at the NHL level or a gap bridge deal that's a 2-year deal to sort of bet on themselves to get the big contract. So we presented that to some of our players, and it's not an easy thing, right? Like, let's take an example of a D1 athlete that's coming out of school. When you're first going to school and teammates and people you're playing against are signing NHL contracts. And then in the summertime, you think, well, at least I'll get an AHL contract. And then you sign an ECHL deal with the hopes to move up. And now all of a sudden the ECHL is down to 13 teams. So, and I'm thinking about signing in the Southern Pro League or the SPHL, right? So it's like, you have to swallow your pride a little bit. I think any player that has an opportunity to play and is going to be one of that 10% or 7% or whatever the number is going to be that's going to play pro hockey this year, I think you have a huge advantage, and you should try to do so if you can. And then players' rights, it hasn't been finalized yet. Our collective bargaining agreement still has some holes to fill before we're allowed to negotiate that part of the process. And Toni might be able to allude to more. I'm not sure what's allowed to be said and not.
Really not much more than what you just said.
Okay. It's a to be determined type situation, it sounds like, as far as retaining players' rights, which I know is going to be a hot topic with 26 voices in the room and 27 potentially if there's any other teams that jump in to the ECHL next year. Another question, Nick, before we jump back to a question for Toni, is it's always tough for veterans, right? The teams in the ECHL can only have 4 rostered players that have played 260 or more games at the ECHL level or higher. Those players are called veterans. And we've known, and you've known, especially from feedback you've heard, how tough that is to narrow it down to 4 when you put together a season opening roster and then throughout the course of the season. Well, now you've got a situation where half the league's not playing and half the league is. Have you heard anything regarding veterans, if there's any additional vet spots, or if that's going to make things tougher on some of those guys that have played a lot of hockey?
I feel like the number is going to be the same. I feel like the league still feels it's a developmental league, and we're doing a great job doing that. So I think the number is going to stay at 4, but I also understand that with this long of a break of hockey, that some players are going to be forced to make decisions, right? They're not just thinking about themselves. They're thinking about other people and their families. Some people have wives and kids, and some of our veterans have that, right? In the past, and they've been super loyal to us. The other part that they have to think about, and it's for them to decide, like, what's it going to take, and do they have the means to make sure that they're prepared to be the player they were before this started, right? If you're a veteran player and you usually skate for 4 weeks and that's enough, and you feel like you're ready, who knows what the method is now? Does it take 8 weeks of skating to make sure that you're prepared? Does it take 12 weeks? I don't know the answer. I think it's going to be very individualistic on what that looks like. And then, do you have the means, and are you able to make the sacrifice to commit yourself to make sure that you're prepared and that this layoff's not going to affect you as an individual? So those would be the conversations that we have with our veterans as we look to bring them back for the following season. It's not that far away now, right? I mean, now you start to look at it and we're 10 months away, and we're not in the spot right now where we're heavily recruiting by any means. We're still trying to wrap up things from what's happened this year and trying to help players get jobs, regardless of the player rights things that we've talked about. I want to help. I wish I could get every single player that was coming to be part of us. I wish I could get every single one of them a job. The reality is it won't happen, but we'll worry about the rights part later. And, we've got a good group of people that have been loyal to us for a really long time, and I don't see that being a hindrance for us in Kalamazoo.
Great question, Joanne, by the way. The second part to that was if veteran, rookie, and those in-between players' status changes at all, if that's tossed out for this season. The answer is no. So if a player was kind of on that threshold of becoming a veteran and they do play this year and they pass that threshold, then next year they would be a veteran. But if they don't play, then obviously they don't get any games added to their total. But there's no special exception for this year. Toni, Michael asked a question. Is there any plan to play summer hockey? I know we've kind of been pushing everything back. At some point, you kind of had to make a decision one way or the other. Is summer hockey an option, or are we full throttle towards the 21-22 season?
Yeah, so the straight answer is no. Summer hockey is not an option. And there's a lot of reasons why, but the main reason is our facility. And it's not just our facility. I'm not going to say it's just Wings Event Center. This is going to go for many of the facilities in the ECHL. It's difficult to keep the ice the way you want it, or the way it should be, over the summer. It's very hot and it's humid, especially in our charming hockey barn. And the glass fogs up, and I skate, but not like a player, obviously, although that'd be funny. But the conditions are not what we'd want them to be. So, and also we are really focused on taking this, I don't want to call it downtime, because it takes, as we've talked about, it takes months and months and months to put together not only an awesome hockey team, but everything in the front office for the fans and the experience and all the game nights and the promotions. This is a gift that we have truly right now to really just make 21-22 amazing. Because normally we're just chasing our tails. Like, as organized as we are, it's still like the clock is ticking. So we're going to use this time to our advantage to make it even better than it already has been. Because last season, attendance wise, we were number 2 in attendance growth in the league again. We were filling our hockey barn 60% of the time. I mean, the momentum was there. The community's coming out. They're embracing the Kalamazoo Wings, as they should, and they have since 1974. So I imagine that it's going to continue to be even better once it's more safe.
You might have already touched on this one, Toni, but it's Corey wants to know why we would choose to not play as opposed to playing with no fans. And I think you might have mentioned that we actually at one point considered playing with no fans for safety purposes. Ultimately, that wasn't the end result.
Yeah, the simple answer is safety, and it's not it's not simple, but and simplistic just to say safety. There's a lot that goes in, and Nick can talk more about this because he lives this life. But when you're traveling, and these players and the hockey ops staff, they go from an arena, a visiting arena, because we can control our arena, right? The safety and the protocol in our arena. But then we're traveling to another arena, and while I trust my peers in the ECHL, you never really know, right? If how safe it truly is. And then if they come in contact, then we're putting them on a bus together in a closed space. And as much as we can socially distance, it's difficult. And I'm just providing one example. I mean, if we have to fly, like last year, we were on the cusp of flying to Newfoundland as the pandemic hit. So imagine, we're planes, trains, and automobiles to get to Newfoundland. It's just, it's very, it's difficult. Now, the teams that are, one of the things we were looking forward to is we were in window 2. We elected to be in the second window. So window 1, they lifted off, as I like to say, this past weekend. So, and I can't publicly say how COVID has affected these teams, but I do know they all played. So we'll see, like adhering to our very detailed return to play protocol, fingers crossed, the season will go off without a hitch. But it's challenging right now. And we just felt that when, as Nick talked about, when Governor Whitmer did the rollback and allowed pro sports, but with no fans, at that point, it really, it spoke volumes, right? It's about safety, and we need to prioritize safety first.
Nick, another question about the roster, which I enjoyed, is, obviously Ben Wilson moved on to Romania for this season. And Ben wants to know if you ever had a player that you found this summer, at least, to replace that toughness, and can you replace a Ben Wilson? I'm sure that'll be a topic going into next season now.
Yeah, obviously Ben Wilson, first of all, was a super loyal player, and he really grew here. I think he grew as a player, he grew as an individual, he grew as a leader in his time in Kalamazoo, and he's just one of those guys. Every single coach we've had that's been with him, whatever assistant coaches we've had, he's just a pleasure to coach. You ask Ben Wilson to touch the line, and he goes 6 feet past every single time, all the time, every day, in every moment. And you ask to get the most out of a player in practice, and Ben Wilson's motor just doesn't stop. So first of all, he provides, a great example to the rest of our team, and obviously brings some toughness. I think toughness is one of those things that is difficult to get. And I think we felt like we made huge strides this summer with the group that we had coming in. We felt like compete was a word that we were lacking the last 2 seasons prior. And we felt like we addressed that. One of the things we looked at when Kyle, Joel, and I were recruiting, if they weren't saying compete, we were moving on. And compete can bring toughness. And we felt like we created some size in the signings that we had. And it's weird because I was thinking about it a little bit prior to, and I'm not exactly sure what the number was that we actually announced, PJ, and we're always going through the process on who's announced and who's not. And in the midst of everything that was going on, I have no idea who was announced and who wasn't. So that part is a little bit sad because you wanted to get your whole roster out there to show everybody what it was going to look like. But we feel like we really addressed the lack of Ben being here. We felt like we found some guys that were willing to be team tough, and we wanted to play that way. And we knew it was something that was lacking. And we felt like we addressed it.
Cameron has a couple of questions in a row here that one of them I can answer. It's about the teddy bears, delivering those to the Children's Hospital, which, Nick, you obviously kickstarted many years ago as an initiative, and we've done it every year since after the teddy bear toss internally. And Toni, maybe you can touch on this too. We aren't obviously doing a teddy bear toss because there isn't a season now, but due to COVID and just making sure we're following all the rules properly, we will not be doing the dropping off teddy bears at the hospital, at least until things are safe to do something like that. So I don't know, Toni, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, you said it exactly right, John. We have some ideas on what we'd like to do. We're getting creative. I can't say much because we're in planning stages, but we are looking at doing something in the spring, right? We're going to winter, spring.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, so hopefully we can do something like that, Cameron. I know, Nick, I don't want to speak for you, but I know that's something that means a lot to you and your family and the players too that sign up to be a part of that event.
Yeah, we get great support, obviously, through our fan base, first of all. And we have certain individuals, and they're probably loyal, and they're probably listening today, that, bring boxes of crayons because the kids can use the crayons one time and then they have to be thrown out. The coloring books that go along with that can be used once and then because of sanitation need to be thrown out. So my kids are fantastic. They've been part of it. They're not allowed to go there to hand them out. But we always talk about that trip, and it's a highlight of our sort of Christmas time where, my kids will collect books, and all of a sudden it'll be January and the Christmas books are on sale for 50 cents a piece for a coloring book, and we'll buy a whole bunch of them. And in the past, my kids have used their own allowance, for gosh sakes, to buy these things, and we collect it all up through the year. And we walk in not just with teddy bears, but we walk in with coloring books and crayons, and they last them months. By the time we leave, they have enough stuff to sort of to keep on going. So it'll be the first time in 15 years that I'm not there for over Christmas time, and it'll be something that I truly miss. But I would love to be part of whatever the next creative idea is, to go try and distract someone for a little while and put a smile on their face just as they do you.
Cameron's second question had a lot to do with your previous answer to the roster and players that we didn't get a chance to announce. I think we announced most of them. There were probably 6 or 7 rookies or newer players we didn't get a chance to announce. He asked if you can share the names of any unannounced players, and I'll help you out since I do have a list in front of me. Just 2 players that were on last year's team that we didn't get a chance to get to that you had signed this offseason, Nick, is Brendan Sanford and Matt Van Voris were 2 names we didn't get a chance to put out there yet, but we're on our list too. So I just want to give those guys their due, because those are 2 guys that came on strong last year for the team.
For sure, absolutely. And Sanford's actually found himself a job and a career, not just a job. He found himself a career. So I think he's on it looks like he's going to retire, and he found something that he couldn't pass up. And then I know Matt Van Boris has been doing a great job in Minnesota, and Matt wouldn't love the accolades, but when things went crazy in Minnesota, I know that him and his girlfriend were outside cleaning up for a couple of days in a row and showing some support there. So just testify to see what type of person he really is.
Tony, one comes in from Scott Dodes, a loyal fan from down in Texas, who is obviously here in Kalamazoo for many, many years. And we had a chance to talk with him and meet with him after we played Allen last year in January. Wants to see if you can speak to the position of our owners, since you do have communication with them more regularly than the rest of us, about is there any truth to the rumors about a struggle with finance being a reason that this season didn't play? I know we've touched on safety, and safety is the big reason, but can you put that rumor to bed, and also their intention to maintain the staff, if there's anything that you can share on that for going forward?
Yeah. Hello to Scott and Debbie. It's good to hear from you guys. Thanks for tuning in. So yeah, I appreciate Scott asking this question, and let me be very clear. It's not a financial decision. We're not going anywhere. I know our owner has said that to various groups over the years, and that still is the case. So the best way I could say is that we had to prioritize, right? This is the first time in my career, my 20+ year career, where we're putting, safety above making money, right? And we could have gotten creative. I mean, we were behind the scenes. I mean, John can attest to this. He's in all my meetings. We're like, okay, how can we be creative in generating revenue? And we're still doing those things. We're digging into the K-Wings closet, if you will. We got 47 years of stuff that, is really valuable. So financially, it was not a financial decision. We're not going anywhere. We're playing hockey in October, and it has nothing to do with finances. End of story.
Thank you. Nick, a question from Michael about the best advice you've ever given your players, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be during the pandemic. It can be something that you value that you've shared with your players in the past.
I think I talk about the word truth. And as an individual, I think it helps anybody. I talk to my kids about it. Truth. But what does truth mean, right? You have to have the ability to believe the truth that your coach is telling you. You have to have the ability to believe the truth that your boss is telling you. You have to believe the truth that your teacher's telling you on what you need to do to improve, to get to where you want to go, and what sacrifices you need to make. So I think the truth is a big thing that I'm about. It's so important to me. my interaction and my communication with my players and my staff, and those things are big, right? You're going to talk to them in two different ways. When you're talking to it, you're going to talk to them first as a friend and first as a person, and then second, you're going to talk to them as an athlete and a coach. If you can do one, then you can separate and do two, right? If you can't do one, you'll never get to two, right? So you'll never be able to park ego at the door. If we have a bad day, it doesn't mean I can't have a conversation with a player. We're not always going to have the results we want, right? If we have a bad night and we lose 4-1 to a rival on a Sunday night when we should have been the fresher team and we're disappointed, when I go into the office the next day, I can't not walk past that person and be who I am, right? So that's part of the truth. I can still ask you how your day is. I can still ask you what's going on. But then, I might have to correct something, or you might not be the person who's in the lineup the next night. And those are decisions that we have to make as a staff. But if you can have that truth and have that truth between each other, I think that's the best advice I would give.
A fan question for Toni. Fans want to know how they can support the team during this process. Obviously, it's a difficult year for everybody with us not playing this year. And I know we appreciate the support we've received since making the announcement. Again, it wasn't the announcement any of us wanted. I think we all wanted to play, and we tried everything we could to play. But we appreciate the way that many of our season ticket holders have responded to it.
Well, there's a lot of ways they can support. First off, Christmas is coming. So we have our annual Greenleaf Hospitality group gift card promotions. That was a lot of G's that I had to try and fit in there. So what the $25 gift card gets you a K-Wings mystery stocking. So it's actually a player worn sock, and there's lots of goodies in them. And so those have been on sale the last 2 Saturdays. You come right to our box office. And they're pretty cool. There's some neat stuff in there. And then additionally, if fans haven't seen, we've been auctioning off jerseys the entire 9 months. Sorry, my computer's dinging. Through the Dash app for various different jerseys we have. We have more still. Michael McFadden and I have been working on that piece. I know Mitch has been working with Michael on equipment that we're going to be looking to sell as well. And these are items that our very own K-Wings have used. So there's some value there. So those are a couple different ways. Of course, keeping up with us on social media. There's a 12 days of Christmas giveaway, which John, you are the man. You're like Santa. So
I just need a better beard.
You're the stash.
had to get rid of that. To answer that, there was a question if I'm behind the social media mustache competition.
Are you behind it?
Well, I had a hand in it, but I lost. So there's no conspiracy.
Did McFadden win?
McFadden and Tanner Sorensen are going to be in the finals. So stay tuned on social this week for that.
Oh, hopefully I didn't just sway the audience to vote for McFadden, because it should be an equal run. But I'm just saying, McFadden's is pretty awesome. So anyways, hopefully I answered your question. Those are some ways to support the K-Wings. The off season is going to feel long. I mean, it already has been long. But really, we're going to be out there. We're going to be relevant this entire time. And I'll tell you this, that we're going to be going on sale for 21-22 very soon. So I can't exactly say when, because I've been telling my staff, my head's kind of been on a swivel. So I'm just trying to keep up with everything and make sure that we're communicating what we need to communicate the right way. And so I'm already diving headfirst into 21-22, full steam ahead.
Nick, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but hopefully this is an easier one than it could be. It's about the affiliation with Vancouver. This was supposed to be the second of our 2-year agreement with the Canucks. Do you know at all how that's going to look going into next season? Do we waste the second year, I guess, by not playing, or is that something that rolls over?
Yeah, I think that the relationship's been strong. I think that it's made strides through these last few years, and we continue to make steps in the right direction. I was a little concerned with the COVID, what it was going to look like for us. And obviously they play in Utica, New York. We all know how difficult New York is getting hit right now. So it's not looking very positive for those teams. And if you see the North Division of the ECHL opting out there really early on, obviously 3 weeks before us, and understanding that they didn't really have a chance to make it work. I'm not sure what the dynamic was going to look like when it came to rosters and size and players and things like that, because there was a lot of fluid decision making that was still happening. Right now there's no indication that our relationship's been soured in any way. But time will soon tell. Obviously first they're trying to get their NHL season to get started here in January. I think once they know exactly what that's going to look like from a player's perspective, then I think you'll see some movement in the American Hockey League. And, I'm not sure it's going to look too different than what's going on. It's just a guesstimation. I have no inside information. But I could see something where it's similar to what we have going on, where not every team's playing, and there's some teams that are in different situations. And you look at those ownership groups and how some of them are owned by NHL teams and some of those teams are owned independently. I think that's one of the biggest challenges they have at the American League level. They've been great communicators the whole time, super supportive of our decision making, and we've been talking through this and communicating through this the whole time. So is there anything in place? No, there is not anything in place. I'd be lying if I told you that. Has it been discussed as a slide year on the contract? No, that hasn't even been discussed right now. It's more about the people involved. I think that's been our concerns first, and then eventually we'll get to the work part of things after that.
A couple more questions about for season ticket holders who have already committed to this season, rolling those tickets over to next year. Obviously, if there are special circumstances, I know it happens all the time, we do encourage our season ticket holders to reach out to your reps and work with them on a plan for you specifically. We don't want to say it's a unified situation for everybody. And Toni, maybe you can touch on that too. I know there's some concerns over, some people's situations being different than others. From an organizational standpoint, we plan on rolling those season tickets into the 21-22 season, but if you have special requests for your reps, that would be the recommended route, correct?
Yeah, we have a lot of empathy for everyone's unique and individual situation. So while we're rolling the tickets over and depending when you renewed, so if you renewed back in March, like right before the pandemic, you were locking in at the 19-20 pricing. So, and this actually gives me a good opportunity to talk about this part of it. So I appreciate the question. So short answer is yes, go to your rep. We certainly understand the situations. When we move into 21-22, it's not like the pandemic's just going to be gone, right? So we're going to have to take extra precautions, as we were and planning on doing, to make sure everyone that comes to our facility feels safe and it's in a clean environment. And when you're, getting together with large groups of people, with that comes a cost. And this is no surprise, right? We're seeing this in other lines of businesses, whether it's a restaurant or airlines or whatever. So pricing will likely be increasing in 21-22. And this is simply because of the amount that it's going to cost us as a business to ensure safety for everyone around us. So more to come on that. But as it relates to this year's tickets that were purchased, if you are comfortable rolling them over, we'd love to have you. Your seats are there. Your seat backs haven't been moved. We know how important that is to our fans. Listen, I like my seats too. I was like, man, I may have to move. So I kind of like sitting in section 8, row L. So anyways, but we'd love to have everyone back and reach out to your rep. Your rep has been reaching out, I'm sure. And if you haven't looked at your email, I encourage you to, because there's probably several emails from them, if not a phone call.
Nick, a question about some of our veteran players or older players, if you will. Are you worried at all about some of them deciding to hang up the skates and retire, given this situation has kind of pushed some of them into that route?
Yeah, of course. Obviously you look at the veteran players that we had coming in here and guys that have been around for a really long time. And Eric Ketelist comes to mind, has been with us for almost a decade, right? So he's been around for a long time, and he has a wife and he has someone else to think about. And, he's got to make the right decision for himself. You look at Justin Taylor, his wife, Kelsey, and Jet they're a family, right? So they got to do what's right. I don't want to speak for any of them. That's for sure. They have the right to speak for themselves, and I don't want to put any pressure on anybody. But there are players that have been loyal to us that we've tried to be loyal to as well, and those individuals have to make their own decisions. So of course, when you're dealing with any time of someone who's leaning on someone else or even isn't, just the timeline, right? I think about it, and my wife and I have thought about this numerous times about what would we do if we were still playing? You know, the summer job runs out, you're hoping to play, now there's nowhere to play and there's no summer job. So now what are you doing? You know, you have a family to take care of, or even just yourself to take care of, and you have bills. And, you know, I know the life of a minor hockey league player. I've been there, you know, and it's not as fancy as everybody believes it is. That's for sure. You know, the first half of the year, you're paying off your credit card bills to get to Christmas. And then you get to Christmas and you start saving up for the summertime to get through the summer again. And it's a revolving process that keeps going back and forth. And if you're one of the lucky ones who doesn't have to do it that way, good for you. You know, I worked 50 hours a week in the summer when I was a hockey player at the same time as my training regime to make sure that I was ready. And everybody's situation is different. So we understand that. That'll be part of the recruiting process as we talk to those individuals as well. Will be, what are you doing? What's this look like? You know, and then asking those tough questions too. Are you prepared to have the commitment level that you need to be the best player that you can be and the player that we expect you to be? So all those things will be factors in making our decisions as we move forward, and it'll be factors for themselves if they need to move on or not.
Question for Toni, and I can kind of give you a head start with the answer that I have here for it. But a lot of other Michigan hockey teams, or some other Michigan hockey teams, are planning on playing, like Saginaw and Flint, as well as Grand Rapids. Why not the K-Wings? And this question from Spencer. Now I can say, you know, Saginaw and Flint are in the Ontario Hockey League, a Canadian junior league. So that's most of those teams are in Canada. There's a few American teams, and that's a whole different situation there. And from my understanding, at one point they were talking about outlawing checking in that league because of the pandemic. So it's not like they're just starting back up as is. And Grand Rapids, I don't think, as far as I've seen, has announced, the AHL hasn't announced an official return to play plan yet. So before we confuse people, you know, the state of Michigan's been hit pretty hard by this pandemic in different ways than some other states maybe have. And as you said early on here tonight, Toni, the restrictions in Michigan were pretty high and kind of forced a lot of teams to have to make tough decisions. But maybe you want to touch on that question.
Yeah, you know, it's a good question. Here's what I'll say, or, you know, what makes sense to me in terms of when you look at other teams. So yeah, Grand Rapids, I can't really speak for the Griffins. Now, the American Hockey League has announced, but as Nick said, there's a lot of work at the American League that still needs to be done. And because some of those teams are owned by NHL clubs, there's, you know, if they're privately owned versus owned by an NHL club, that makes a huge difference. So, and where Grand Rapids stands in that, not sure, still a question mark. So hopefully I know that they're sending, I mean, I follow them and they're still communicating and selling. And so it looks good for them. I will say this, that it's really for the ECHL and for the Kalamazoo Wings, a lot of this is boiling down to our negotiations with the players union. And so beyond the safety piece of it. And so it turns into a financial conversation. And I can't go too deep into it, but each team and how they work with their players is a big part of that. And if it's unionized or not unionized, and that makes a difference. So hopefully that answers Spencer's question. Ultimately for Kalamazoo, just to point out for the fans that don't know, we are privately owned. So we own everything. And by we, I don't mean me, obviously, or Nick. I think most of the fans know who owns us. But so we're able to make decisions that are best for our organization. And kind of in a silo, if you will. You know, we're not owned by a municipality, you know, so we don't have to, there's not a lot of red tape for us. We get to make the socially responsible decision and the one that made the most sense. And for the moment in time that we are in right now. And unfortunately, that's where we're at. If we were supposed to open in the summer, which, you know, we weren't, but if we were, we would have been playing. Because COVID wasn't in its second wave, you know, so hopefully I've answered Spencer's question. It was a good one.
Nick, I have one more I wrote down for you, and it goes towards recruiting for next season. At what point, I know it's still painful for a lot of us to kind of come to grips with the fact that we're not going to be playing. It's only been a week. At what point do you guys, I know how hard you guys work, you, Joel Martin and Kyle Forte, what point do you turn the page, and how do you have to get creative now with some players playing, some teams playing, others aren't? Do you look to Europe more? Do you look more at the college game? Is it similar to past years, but just with some rules, as you said earlier, that haven't been established yet? How does that work for you guys?
Well, I think first of all, it's difficult because there's no one to lean on, right? Like we all have hockey networks. We've all been involved in. Joel's been involved in hockey his whole life. I've been involved in hockey my whole life, but there's no one that's done this prior to us, right? I can't call a friend who coached on another team who's gone through a pandemic, right? I can't call a recruiter. I can't call an NHL general manager to say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? Now I can use that information and use my network to try and gather knowledge, which we are going to do, and we're going to reach out to those people on how to handle it. But we don't know. The example I used before about the veteran player on what he's willing to do. What about the D1 player where D1 Division I hockey players are playing right now, and you have a D1 player that you signed? You know what I mean? Now that player doesn't play for another 11 months, and it's already been 8 months. So it's 19 months since that player played, yet there's a D1 kid coming out of school that has played. Which player has more value? Does he have more value because he played and he's off for 5 months as opposed to 19 months? It's a big difference in it. And it's really going to be individual based. And I think for us, it'll be extra homework that we're going to have to do as a staff. There's not a lot we can do from like a conditioning standpoint where we could bring them in early or take a look at them. Like we don't have the means at this level. I think you only allowed one official recruiting visit to your city a summer. You know what I mean? So I could literally have one person come to Kalamazoo to show them in the CBA what Kalamazoo is all about. So that helps for one person, you know what I mean? So I can't do that with 30 players to see what they look like, to see what their training regimes look like. So we're going to have to ask those certain questions of those guys to see what they're doing. And then you will reach out to your network as much as you can to try and gather information. So when does it start? Well, this afternoon, there was players that we were recruiting in the summertime that were on a team that's heavily affiliated that chose to go somewhere else. So other than Kalamazoo, and my staff members are reaching out to those players to see how their experience was for those 6 days that they were in training camp. And I'm not going to say team names or whatever, but there's players that we missed on that we liked a lot that we've already started to reach out to. So it never stops. Recruiting never stops as much as people think it does. The phone calls never stop. You're never finished your job ever in our role. That's the truth. And it's similar for everyone who's in this business. So it just has to be enough for that day, right? And then you move on to the next day. So there's a lot of wrap up for us. And I know it's a long-winded answer, and I apologize, JP, but there's a lot of wrap up for us still for the next 4 weeks. We left a lot of our work prepping for a January 15th start, and we left a lot of our work. We didn't want to finish too early in September, so we were twiddling our thumbs, for lack of a better term, here in December. We wanted to have the workload progress as it was coming into January 15th. That's a decision we made as a staff. So we're going to finish that first, but literally there was phone calls made today on players that we have interest in.
Toni, this one is kind of a fun one for you. The way I'll end this part of the show is looking ahead to 21-22 for us as a front office staff. We can almost build off of where we started for 20 and 21. An old friend of the program, Chip Stevens, is chiming in with how motivated are you to make 21-22 the best ever with some different community initiatives or promotions, especially given that we're not playing this year? How much extra motivated does that make you to kind of drive the team to help push next season into one of the best ever?
Oh yeah. Well, John knows this, the general public doesn't, but I always build out a strategic plan for every season. Basically once the puck drops in October, I'm building the plan for the next season. And then we go from there, and it's a blank piece of paper every year. And it's like, what can we do that was bigger and better than last year? And so we had a big mountain to climb, and there are some really cool creative concepts that we're going to bring to Wings Event Center in 21-22. So to answer Chip Stevens' question, And I'm surprised he waited this long to chime in because he likes to kind of get in on the K-Wings action.
I waited this long to get to the question.
Oh, okay. Okay. He probably wants to interview you again, John. It's not so much asking me a question, but we're really motivated. I can't emphasize enough how much I miss, being around you all every day. It's been difficult. Like, I miss you guys, and we meet, we do everything virtually. It's not the same, and I know we all feel that. And I miss the fans. I miss, I miss the hot dogs. I like the wings event. I like our hot dogs. So, there's a lot of things I miss. So we're all really motivated. So I'll take this last minute here to give a shout out to the front office staff. I know someone asked a question, and I want to make sure I answer it about our small but mighty staff. We have been working full time this entire time, and that says a lot to our owners. So a big thank you to the Stryker Johnston family, because we were very fortunate in Kalamazoo, and that wasn't the case for all the teams in the ECHL. And so we've been full steam ahead and using that time wisely to make 21-22 even better.
Nick, I do want to get to this one because someone said, Dan says, smile more, Nick. And Joe B wants to know what the feeling was like when Jake Kiley signed to get a shot up in Vancouver to at least help them during that playoffs when they were in the bubble. What your reaction was to that?
Well, first off, I do smile. I do smile. It's a happy day. Obviously, any chance we get to reach out and be able to talk to our fan base is fun. It's obviously not the best circumstance in the world. It's not the best interview for me to be excited about. But echoing what Toni said about ownership group and how they've let us do our thing and continue to work towards that. And I think to be motivated for 2021 and this season that's coming around the corner here for us, I mean, how can you not be? Right? This is what you love to do. This is what you get up for every day, is to try and build a championship hockey team. So super motivated. Jake Kiley, obviously getting a contract extension essentially is what it turns out to be, and getting the call up there. He got the call, is a testament to Joe Martin. And Joe Martin deserves all the props. Jake Kiley, when he was first at camp in Vancouver and Utica, was a young goaltender that had a lot to learn and needed to get faster and need to be more mobile, and was obviously a big frame as a 6'4" guy his whole career, and it's worked really well. And then he came to pro hockey, and understanding that it's not just 6'4" anymore, it's 6'4" and athletic is successful. And Joel was able to help him on a daily basis, and Joel's on the ice with our goaltenders every single day prior to practice, doing extra with them and extra video with them. So not only is he the assistant coach, he's the goalie coach, and he deserves a lot of props. And I know that Jake Kiley's super appreciative of him. I know that Joe Martin had him on his hip rotation and that type of routine to try and loosen him up and get him going. Those things that Joel didn't learn until later on in his career that he had to do to be successful and had to do to be able to move. That he was showing to a young goaltender that's improved immensely because of it. So anytime you see a chance where a guy goes up and gets an opportunity, and now you have Yanni Gord, who wins a Stanley Cup, and Jordan Binnington the year before, and we can sort of put a Kalamazoo feather in the cap to our community and our organization for helping a little bit and being a little part of that, is super exciting for sure. And I'll smile for that, definitely.
Well, hopefully we can all have some more smiles as we turn the page to the 21-22 season. I know it's still fresh in a lot of people's minds. This has been a difficult week, I'm sure, for the fan base, as it has been for our staff. But we want everybody to know how much we miss seeing them, how much we miss playing hockey, how much we are counting down the days to the 21-22 season. Good news on the horizon. Kalamazoo in the news yesterday, Pfizer releasing the first vaccine out to the public. That's awesome. I mean, we could all use some good news right now. And I anticipate a lot of reasons to smile as we get closer to 21-22. But I want you guys to have a final chance. Any last words before we sign off here tonight on this special edition of Just Winging It?
Go ahead, Toni.
No, just I mentioned the front office staff. I'd like to just individually give them a shout out to Tim and McFadden and you, John, on the creative side, and then Derek and Michael Keel and Fletcher and Jason on the sales side, and of course Kelly, who supports both Nick and I. A big shout out to them. as well as my governor partner, Brad Vandenberg. Couldn't do it without him because he is the alternate governor with me. And we've been joined at the hip throughout this process. So a shout out to all those individuals, and often not celebrated enough, where Nick and I get the FaceTime and get to say and smile and do all the cool things, but they're the ones that are, supporting us as we're making these tough decisions and doing these tough interviews.
Then for me, it's just echoing it, right? Everybody's been super helpful, right? You had a couple things you could have done. You could have done nothing, or you could have got better. And I feel like all our staff has taken the steps in the right direction to get better. I would say buy local. I would say stay safe. I would say enjoy your holiday season, everybody. For us hockey fans, it's not going to be normal. So take advantage of that as well. That's the best advice that I can give. We thank everybody for being interested in it, and we know that we're going to make that next season super successful, but it'll take you guys too. So enjoy some extra time off, maybe a little too much for all of us, but buy local and stay safe, and we appreciate everybody.
Thank you both for doing this tonight. Thank you to all the fans who joined in live on our Facebook Live feed. This will be our normal time for future Just Winging It shows. They won't all be live, but they'll be at 6 o'clock Monday nights. I want to say thanks to you guys again, and happy holidays to everybody. We love you, Kalamazoo, and we can't wait to get back to Wings Event Center next fall.